Hello, you.
Oh, no, stop. Are we still doing this? After all these episodes? Really? Let's just cut it out with the bloody. After all, friendliness is our number one purge. Do we have a nice sound for it?
Hello, you Anglophonians.
Yes, this is much better. Maybe we try other sound effects, but now start with the episode already.
The year is 1940. The Second World War has begun, and even the small country of Belgium can no longer escape it. Nevertheless, and despite a certain shortage of paper, Spirou Magazine is still published. This November, the magazine's cover hero embarks on a new adventure. Summarizing the Spirou at the North Pole story is a bit difficult. The problem is that it's a sequence of scenes similar to Tintin in the Land of the Soviets. Spirou finds himself in one dangerous situation after another. Well, let's try it anyway. The story begins where the previous story ended so abruptly. Spirou is lying on a hammock and gets a phone call. Because of his adventures, he has become a celebrity. Reporters are interested in him, but so are film studios. A film studio wants to make a film with Spirou, but a competing studio kidnaps Spirou during filming and locks him in a basement. With Spip's help, he escapes and hijacks a plane. Having no idea where he is or where he is going, he eventually finds himself over the Arctic, where he runs out of fuel and has to make an emergency landing. Chased by a polar bear, he finds himself just in time for Christmas 1940 in the igloo of an Inuit family celebrating the holiday. He helps the Inuit on a seal hunt before heading south on a dog sled. However, the dogs run away from him, so after a few adventures he finally arrives in a town on foot. There he has a heavenly appearance, although it turns out in retrospect that he had only a concussion because a bottle fell on his head. With the help of a kind person, he finally returns to civilization, where he takes a room in a hotel. But he needs money, so he decides to go into town to look for work. And at this point, this story breaks off and flows seamlessly into the next. But there is something special about that, which has to do with the circumstances of how Spirou at the North Pole came about in the first place, and how it happened that not Rob-Vel but Chez drew it. The fact that Hitler forced a world war on Europe in 1939 was terrible enough. For the magazine Spirou, however, the situation became even more complicated. Robert Velter, Rob-Vel, the illustrator of the character Spirou, lived in France, and it was there that mobilization was proclaimed and young men of military age were drafted into the army. Rob-Vel was also affected. In the last episode that was about Spirou, we already talked about the fact that he still delivered his drawings. He drew the story and his wife completed the pictures with the help of artist friends. This was initially possible because Rob-Vel was only used in maneuvers, but then the war came to Western Europe and he had to go into battle. Finally, in May 1940, Rob-Vel was wounded and taken prisoner of war. At the same time, Belgium was overrun and occupied by the German army. Spirou Magazine had to stop working. In the 3 months that no new magazine appeared, the publishers tried to reorganize themselves. They had a young artist under contract, a certain Joseph Gillian, who worked under the alias Chez. He had previously worked on other series, and since he was of the right age, he too was drafted and sent to the front. He too was wounded and captured, but managed to escape. In the absolute chaos of war, it seemed like a godsend for Chez to be offered to design the cover series of Spirou. In October 1940, a new Spirou magazine was published. Chez picked up the story where it left off. Spirou in a chase with a couple of criminals. Within 2 pages, Chez brought the story to an end, and then began the storyline Spirou at the North Pole. Originally, the story was divided into 3 phases: Spirou makes movies, Spirou and the Inuit, and Spirou and the Trappers. Chez kept the story's episodic style on purpose, as it was clear from the start that he was just a temp. When Rob-Vel would return from captivity, he should take the helm again. So Chez designed the story to be ending at any time in a very short amount of time, just like he did with Rob-Vel's story. It may sound strange, but between the end of 1940 and the spring of 1941, the situation in France and Belgium stabilized. Both countries were occupied by Germany and strictly administered. Although the publishing house Dupuis was able to continue its work and publish more stories about Spirou, the events were now under the eyes of the German censors. The censors were very vigilant and tried to suppress anything that could be construed as subversive to children. In addition, the censors were always of the opinion that in these times it was simply a waste of paper to publish a magazine for children at all. A column printed in Spirou Magazine called The Snoop's Letter was suspected of containing communications for the resistance, and a series on aviation was interpreted by the censors as revealing strategic secrets. It wasn't, but we see here how paranoid fascist regimes are. Finally, in 1941, Rob-Vel was released from captivity and returned home. From March 1941, he was to take over the Spirou series once again. So Chez brought Spirou back home and to a point where Rob-Vel could just take over. But for Chez, the story didn't end there, neither in the real nor in the metaphorical sense. On one hand, he now designed his own series, such as The Adventures of Jean Valadi or an illustrated biography of the famous pastor Don Bosco. On the other hand, a few years later, he should be asked to take over the Spirou series again. But we are not there yet. For now, Rob-Vel once again drew The Adventures of the famous bellhop.
But we will keep an eye on Spirou. So see you next time.